The Eastern Conference Finals are about to start, and it's an unexpected yet long-anticipated rematch. The Pacers are back for the second year in a row, while the Knicks are making their first appearance in 25 years. But what exactly can we expect to see in this matchup, and who ultimately has the advantage? Before we dive into this specific matchup, I want to take a moment to just acknowledge how good the Pacers have been since the start of the new year. If we include both the regular season and the playoffs, since January 1st, they've played 49 games with Tyrese Haliburton in the lineup, and in those games, they've gone 38-11. That's on pace for 64 wins over an 82-game season, and I think it's important to shed some light on the fact that although they finished 4th in the East, this is a team that's played like a championship contender for months. Of course, the driving force behind their success over these past 2 years has been their transition offense. So the first question the Knicks will have to answer is whether or not they'll be able to literally slow them down. Time and time again, we question whether or not a defense will be able to make the Pacers play in the half court, and time again, they get anything they want in transition. If you remember last year's playoffs, a big talking point heading into the second round was how Indiana's pace wouldn't translate and how the Knicks would be able to make them play at their speed, giving them an instant advantage. Then in game 1, it was the exact opposite, with New York speeding up their approach in an effort to match Indiana's pace, and it worked. So I do want to take a moment to acknowledge how flexible of a roster construction the Knicks do have, with guys like Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson capable of initiating offense in all sorts of different ways. But on the other side of things, the Pacers intentionally run a 10 or 11 man rotation, and that's because they want to run their opponents out of the gym. Between the constant up and down, all of the ball movement, and multiple screening actions in the half court, they're one of the most physically demanding teams to play against. So what they'll do is go deep into their depth chart to find any sort of spot minutes for the last guys in their rotation, which then keeps their starters fresh for fourth quarters and potential clutch play. What that means for the Knicks is that if they're able to stop Indiana's transition offense at least to some extent, you're not only taking away some of their easiest opportunities, you can serve your own energy and can keep your starters from having to labor in their 42nd or 43rd minutes of the game. As for what it takes to actually limit those opportunities, I think the Knicks can go with one of two strategies. On one hand, they can just simply prioritize getting back on defense over anything else. Don't crash, always get set, and try to force the Pacers into a half-court game. On the other hand, they could try the exact opposite, crashing the offensive glass aggressively and dominating the possession game, which could then force Indiana's wings to have to stay and box out instead of getting a head start on the fast break. If they've got any two of Hart, Cat, or Robinson on the floor, or even all three, they've got a serious advantage on the glass, and I expect a balance between possessions and transition play to be the ultimate chess match of this series. I'm sure a lot of you watching this video right now have been streaming the NBA playoffs online. At least I know I've been, and two things I always worry about is whether or not I'll have a fast connection, and of course making sure my information is protected. With Surfshark, streaming the NBA playoffs has never been more secure. Through their VPN, you can simultaneously connect as many devices as you want to the same account, so whether you're trying to use the internet on an iPhone or a Windows computer, you'll have access to all of the benefits. Those benefits include faster speeds, protection of private information, and even ad blocking. Surfshark also offers an antivirus program for even more protection, and the best part is that there's no risk for giving it a try, thanks to their 30-day money-back guarantee. Go to surfshark.com/hoopvenue or just use code hoopvenue to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Once again, that's code hoopvenue for 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. As far as the half-court game goes, one of my biggest takeaways from these playoffs has been the gear New York hit as a defense. I'm not sure if they were hiding their cards during the season or just simply locked in, but this looks like a completely different defensive unit. Especially in that Boston series, they really leaned into a switch-heavy strategy, and it worked extremely well. Throughout the season, they had already shown to be comfortable switching between Hart, McHale, OG, and McBride. Then against the Celtics, they started including Cat into those switches, as they placed a ton of trust in him to defend in space. They even matched him up against Jaylen Brown as a primary defender for extended stretches in that series. In this one, I'm sure he'll start games on Miles Turner, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see him spend some time on Siakam or even a guy like Nesmith to play more of a helper role. With that said though, with the way the Pacers have been shooting, I'm not sure there's much room for the Knicks to bring help. Through the first 2 rounds, Nembhard has made 50% of his threes. Siakam has made 44%, Turner has made 45%, and Nesmith has made 48%. And not to state the obvious, but if their entire starting five's just gonna make every shot they take, it's pretty likely that they're not gonna lose many games. Going back to what I said about switching though, this has especially been prominent in minutes with Mitchell Robinson on the court, as his versatility has sort of unlocked everything for this Knicks team. He looks to be in the best physical shape he's been in half a decade, and the way he's able to move at that size gives New York endless flexibility. He's been switching across the board and holding his own against all 5 positions. He's been playing at the level of screens and using his length to force turnovers, and he remains an elite drop defender who can deter shots, protect the rim, and of course control the glass. For that reason, I think the double big lineup could play a huge role in this series, especially if they're comfortable switching both of those guys onto guards. On the Pacers side, I think they're going to look to avoid Robinson as much as they possibly can. Because they've got the facilities to run a 5-out offense, whoever Mitch is matched up with, I'd expect to spot up in the slot so that they can limit his defensive presence. And this could cause another chess match between Thibodeau and Carlisle, with all sorts of pre-switching, scram switching, and all of that good stuff happening to keep him on the baseline. On the flip side, I think they're going to look to put Cat in every action. Like I mentioned, he can switch, but Halliburton's incredibly difficult to stay in front of, and if they're going to let him get that matchup consistently, I'm expecting lots of blow-bys. We saw the same thing in the first 2 rounds against Giannis and Jared Allen. Both of them are capable switch bigs, and neither could stay in front of Tyrese, so he created a ton of advantages in isolation. The problem for the Knicks, though, is that unlike Giannis or Allen, Cat is a very weak drop defender. So if you're not switching, you're likely hedging, and not only does Tyrese pick apart those coverages, the Pacers are one of the best teams we've ever seen at extending advantages. So whether it's Nesmith, Turner, or Siakam screening, they'll find ways to create lots of good shots. Another guy who I'm expecting the Pacers to put in tons of action is Jalen Brunson. Indiana loves their guard-to-guard screens, and Brunson's the only defender who the Knicks don't like to switch with. Against the Celtics, they had him hedging while the point of attack defender went under, but I'm not sure that's an option against Halliburton, not only because of how lethal the pull-up jumper is, but because of how quick he is to get off the ball and create an advantage for the screener. This again puts the Knicks in a tough spot where I'm not sure if Brunson's hedging or switching and what that looks like behind the play. I wouldn't be surprised if they go to some sort of pre-switching to keep both Brunson and Cat from having to defend the primary action, or if they even go to less lineups of those two on the floor together, which again would play into the notion that this could be a very big series for Robinson. Keep in mind though, these are just the Halliburton minutes I'm talking about, and I actually think the Knicks should be perfectly fine in the other minutes. He typically plays 35 to 36, so for the other 12 or so, they should be able to do what they normally do, and it should work. But as far as starting and closing minutes go, I have a few points of emphasis for New York's defense. The first is of course to limit transition, which is the first key for literally every team playing against the Pacers. The next key is split up into 2, which is not only to find more minutes for Robinson, but find ways to keep him in the primary action as much as possible. That would entail protecting both Brunson and Cat and keeping them away from the action if you can. Then across the board, they'll have to execute timely switches to not give up any numbers advantages. It'll be really tough to execute because of how elite Indiana's offense is, but they've got some great defensive wings, and they've potentially got the offensive firepower to outgun them on the other end. The first thing I'm looking for with New York's offense is what they decide to do regarding pace. I already talked about the prospect of potentially crashing the offensive glass aggressively, but what will they do off of defensive rebounds? In the regular season, they ranked 28th in offensive pace, averaging about 15.5 seconds per possession. In the playoffs, that slowed down a touch to almost 16 seconds, which is the slowest of the remaining 4 teams. But they were also a very slow offense last year, only to match Indiana's pace in the second round and play in transition, so I think it'll be really interesting to track which version we get this time around. It's worth noting that the Pacers want to speed their opponents up and make teams beat them at their own game. That's why they're maybe the most aggressive team we've ever seen in terms of ball pressure. It's rare to see an NBA defense extend 94 feet, but between Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith, they've got 2 guys who are constantly looking to pick up the ball full court in an effort to make the offense as uncomfortable as they possibly can. They'll make it hard to inbound, they'll play incredibly physical, and this not only forces initiators to work just to get the ball up court, it creates chaos and leads to lots of turnovers. With that said, I'm not sure how big of an impact this has on the Knicks for a few reasons. First is the fact that their point guard is Brunson. He's got a really low center of gravity and is incredibly strong, so he's not as bothered by physical on-ball defense, and he's got one of the tightest handles we've ever seen, so he rarely ever turns it over. Then, in the event they're able to deny him the ball, New York's shown to be comfortable using Hart, McHale, OG, or whoever as the point guard, then running Brunson off of screens so that they can set up their offense. Still though, any possession that doesn't start in his hands is an automatic win for the defense, and again, there's so much energy expended just for him to even get a touch. Once he has the ball in the half court, I think the approach is a lot more straightforward for both teams than on the other side of things. Almost all of New York's offense, especially down the stretch, either starts with him using a ball screen or playing one-on-one. So the first question the Pacers have to answer is how they want to defend the pick and roll. Turner isn't much of a switch big, so they're likely going to be forced to choose between one of the more traditional coverages. If Robinson's the one screening, I'd expect them to either have Turner hedge or potentially ice the screen in an effort to get the ball out of Brunson's hands. And if you're going to be bringing that big up to the level, it's imperative that they do not let him reject any screens, so execution at the point of attack has to be flawless. When it's cat screening though, putting 2 on the ball in any capacity is a huge risk because of his ability to pop or attack off the catch, while the Pacers don't have a ton of rim protection behind the play. So if I'm the Knicks and Turner's on cat, I'm running that 2-man game as much as I possibly can just because it feels like an automatic advantage. And for that reason, I wonder if Indiana adjusts by putting Turner on Hart like New York's opponents did in the first 2 rounds. Against Detroit, it was Duren, and against Boston, it was any one of Kristaps, Horford, or Cornette who would match up with Hart and play free safety in an effort to take away the paint while keeping bigs away from the action. If that's the case, there's another coaching chess match. Turner's an elite shot blocker, so the Knicks would want to involve him in action, while the Pacers would want to keep him near the basket. Let's assume for a second that the Knicks aren't able to pull Turner into the action. Then I think their offensive approach goes in one of 2 directions. On one hand, they might start to hunt for mismatches. Like I said, Brunson loves to isolate, and in starting and closing lineups, he could look for the Halliburton or Siakam matchups. This forces some tough decisions. I don't think they'll want either guy switching, so are you hedging, and what does that look like? It might not matter though, because the other direction that the offense could go in is just simply having Brunson play one-on-one against his primary defender. That's when they'll have to decide whether they want to play him in single coverage, double to get the ball out of his hands, or load up aggressively in the gaps. What makes this so tough is that the Knicks have an extremely talented offensive roster filled with shooters and capable decision makers, while Brunson's a great passer. So if they send extra help, they'll probably spend a ton of time in rotation. This speaks to a larger point, and it's the fact that he really is one of the few scheme-proof offensive players who's always going to get his game off. And knowing that, I wonder if the Pacers approach this series with the intention of limiting everyone else on the court. That would mean playing these isolations one-on-one, keeping the ball in front, and making him beat you as a mid-range scorer, then trusting your offense to generate enough points to survive. Because as soon as OG, Mikal, and Cat get going, this becomes a truly unguardable, multi-layered attack that's going to kill you from every spot on the court. And the only way to limit those three is with timely off-ball switching while not letting Brunson get deep in the paint. So, just to recap, if I'm the Pacers, these are my big defensive keys. I think they want to do the inverse of what the Knicks should do on the other side of things, and that means speeding up the opposing offense. I think they should look to keep Turner away from the action as much as possible, unless it's Mitchell Robinson screening, in which case I'd put 2 on the ball to get it out of Brunson's hands. In that same line of thinking, I'm trying to keep Halliburton and Siakam away from Brunson, and if it's Nesmith or Nembhard on the ball, I'm playing those isolations straight up in an effort to get him to empty the clip. I think they should prioritize slowing down OG, Mikal, and Cat, and live with the fact that Brunson's gonna score a lot of points. Like I said, that means timely off-ball switching and not letting Brunson get deep in the paint. If they can execute across the board, they might just be able to slow down New York's offense enough to gain the advantage. So, with everything I talked about in mind, where does that leave us in terms of predicting the series? I'll be completely honest, I think this is going to be the most competitive matchup of the playoffs, and after talking it through, I'm probably even less confident in any pick than I would have been going into it blind. And because it's so close, I ultimately think it's gonna come down to clutch time. Both of these teams have been surgical down the stretch of close games, and whoever executes better in those moments will win the series in my opinion. For the Knicks, it's been elite late game defense and the heroic play of Brunson bringing them home. For the Pacers, it's been flawless team offense and their pressure forcing opponents to make mistakes. Because both have been so good in the clutch, that makes the matchup even more of a 50-50 coin flip than it already was. But if I were forced to make a pick, I'd give the slightest of edges to the Pacers, mostly because of the added depth, giving them a little bit more flexibility and room for error. I'm expecting 7 games either way though, and one of these teams will be making the NBA Finals for the first time in over 25 years. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think's gonna happen in this series. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.